Hello, everybody. Good night, and welcome to the Left, Right, and Center show. Just glad to have you all back again tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're talking about a topic tonight that's a little bit out of style at this point, but we've clashed about it a couple of times, so we thought it'd be fun to, take a take a crack at it during this post-election lull, where there doesn't seem to be too much going on except for election fraud and not election fraud, whatever. So. We're going to do Mueller investigation. We're going to do Russiagate, that kind of stuff for most of the end of the podcast. But I guess before then, we're going to do some news tonight. So strap in and enjoy having I keep wanting to say a balanced view in politics, but that's not necessarily the case. There's just, we have at least two idiots on each side, or one side. We have at least one idiot on each side. How does
I'm
that
an
sound?
idiot on both sides.
There you go.
So
with that, all right, who wants to kick it off with the news?
I can throw something up. Just to break the ice, a little humor. Just for fun. These flags now have something in common. They're flown by people who fly them out of pride, even though they lost, according to everyone but them. Break the ice.
Oh yeah, look at that. I wonder if his background was okay.
So
all right. So everybody, required materials for watching our podcast is having a mirror.
Hold on,
right,
I can fix it. Watch.
Boop. Perfect.
So it's just going to be me that's mirrored, but you'll never know.
I bet you're sure it's not mirrored anymore.
Probably not. Yeah. But anyway, this was just meant to be humorous. Obviously, there was the big to-do recently about the Confederate flag and blah, blah, blah. So I thought it would get...
Was there? I didn't hear much about that recently.
Not in the last couple months. I mean,
right. Gotcha. Yeah.
A couple years.
Yeah, I saw a couple variations of this. I saw there's more similarities. It's like they both fought a war that lasted only 4 years. They both lost.
Yeah. There's something about the about that group and flags. That's for sure. Regardless of what's on them or what they stand for, they're very, very flagalicious.
I suppose.
I do have to say, I think the people that are riding the Trump train wave are the same people. They're the right's equivalents of the left of deleting people off of Facebook. Just two extremes.
Yeah, there's absolutely two extremes right now. I just saw a statistic recently. Speaking of extremes, I saw a statistic that it seems like half the Republican base thinks that Trump won the election, which is a little crazy to me. Maybe it's because I live on the East Coast and I'm really not like a true red-blooded Republican, but I mean, you guys know how I feel about what's going on with the election. So
that's
crazy.
That's kind of what we've talked about. Like a few times I've said, like when Trump says something or does something, I'm like, he's got to be careful with what he says because people believe him. And you're always like, no one actually takes him literally. Nobody believes him. I mean, the truth is, a large portion of people do.
Right. But but why do I have a different opinion about this than I do about all those other things? Like what's changed? Why has the wool suddenly come off my eyes? I'm still the same person.
I think because it's just getting too extreme. Right, it's like
right because there's something different about this, which is it's way more extreme.
Yeah, but the point is still valid that people take his word and his point of view at face value, right?
Yeah,
and so when he lies about something, it's important.
For sure.
Well, it's really interesting, not to get too academic, but I'm a big believer in Malcolm Gladwell's books. I'm a huge fan of Outliers, David and Goliath.
I'm not familiar.
He's like a thought leader, takes complicated philosophical ideas, statistics, case studies, boils them down to something that is a little bit more palatable. People can digest it, look at it, read it, get their feet wet in the psychology, philosophy world. He's I would say pretty well regarded on both sides of the aisle. I mean, he he was one of the people that was commissioned to help President Obama organize the presidential library, but that's not to say that, he's necessarily progressive. I'd say he's pretty much, he's challenges a bunch of different ideas, but he is a well-vetted thought leader, I would say. He has a whole book I'm reading right now. It makes a really strong case that, I think it might be worth reflecting on. You should read the book. And we're all guilty of this. So I'm saying this, not targeting you at all, Nathan, but targeting all of us. And that, our default is good intentions. Like the human nature, it is we have a truth default where we like to believe in the best intentions of certain individuals. So being
truth default. Tell that to my 3-year-old.
No, seriously, right?
I have a truth default.
Oh, there's rare exceptions where people are skeptical, but think about Amanda Knox. Everybody thinks that Amanda Knox is guilty because she breaks the truth default. She's not reacting the way that we wanted her to react in those things emotionally, and so therefore people like automatically ostracize her. Think about other people who have committed crimes. Jerry Sandusky at Penn State took 10 years to convict a dude, and there was actually mounting evidence ahead of time. For 10 years people had cases. But there was like, oh, no, Jerry's not a pedophile. He just runs a summer camp and it's kind of weird, but is around a lot of kids all the time. Now, us on the outside, objectively, we're able to be like, that's fucked. That's wrong. That's problematic. Like, there is no doubt, right? There's no doubt evidence-wise. However, internally at Penn State and the colleagues around him, there was a lot of doubt. There's Cuban spies were incredibly successful at infiltrating our CIA. And it's not that they were convincing. It's not that they were special or 007. Right. They just built good rapport with people. And so people trusted them. People liked them. And so I think there's something to be said about Trump and a lot of conservatives where at this point, just like you said, we finally broke the barrier of, all right, I can't translate anymore on Trump. Like, he actually explicitly has lost this election. And I hope that this is a gateway to now look back and be like, realizing that, sure, there's certain things that you're well warranted to say that, the media treated Trump differently in certain regards, maybe if they give him more benefit of the doubt in certain places. However, I hope this kind of breaks the barrier a bit, the sound barrier, and to look back and be like, oh, what else was I translating on behalf of Trump because of a truth default, because of a well-intentioned default? I'm guilty of this too. We're all guilty. And I think that's the point of this book, is that every single person, we're very connable. Every single human being, we're very, very deceivable, connable, and we're very bad at telling when people are lying. We're very bad at it.
Yeah, that's actually part of...
I'm good at it. I have a bullshit meter.
A bullshit meter.
Look at it. It just popped up, man. It's like in real life.
Can you sell that to me? Yeah, so I mean, you're right. A lot of people do in our daily life. We have a truth default with the people around us. Like we don't necessarily think of ourselves as trusting people, but as when you're learning about cybersecurity, as I did for my degree, you learn about something called social engineering, which is that like you can watch a whole bunch of people who are trying to compromise a location. Hackers oftentimes need to be able to physically access the hardware, and so there's a whole wing of there's a whole branch of hacking called social engineering. And you watch some of these videos and it's crazy what people believe, right? Because we don't believe bad things about every people we meet. So when some guy walks through your front door and he says, hey, I'm here for a meeting with so-and-so, right? And they have the name of somebody, so it sounds legitimate. Like, I'm here for a meeting with so-and-so. Hey, can you print something from me off this USB drive real quick? And they plug that sucker right in, and then there's there's malware on there, and then they have access to their computer. Not to make a point for you, but yeah, we have a trusting default for sure, generally speaking.
I bet too, it's Malcolm Gladwell makes a good point. It's not that doubt is a tool for disbelief. It's doubt is an alliance of belief. It takes insurmountable evidence for us to beyond a reasonable doubt in our daily life. I bet someone walking into a house, like, oh, do you mind if I plug this into your computer real quick? There's probably some weird feelings. It's like, ooh, that doesn't sit well with me, but we immediately rationalize away from it. We immediately go, oh, okay, but maybe they actually really just got to print something. It's like,
and I don't want to transgress on the social situation by saying no. I don't want to be that, jerk who's being a prude for no reason. Like, I know this is, probably, my cybersecurity department already trained me on this year, but do I really want to just hold things up in case this guy standing in front of me is a hacker? That kind of stuff. Like, you rationalize. Everybody does it, yeah. So, not to make your point for you, but
no. So I think the Trump administration is, and it's not just the Trump. I want to be very conscious right now to any Republicans or conservatives watching this. I'm not doing this to point my finger and be like, you've all been conned. It's reality is everybody everywhere is conned all the time. And I believe the Trump administration is one example of that in real time that we can watch. At least, if all else, the election, like he's literally still tweeting, I've won the election. And it's like, no, you haven't. And today I met with somebody who's like, yeah, there's an asterisk. That was his response. He's like, there's an asterisk that Trump has lost the election because, we're seeing things turn up. And it's like, no, we're actually not. We're really not seeing anything turn up.
Well, we're seeing a few things turn up. I have some of that. We can talk about it after the news, but
nothing that can actually change the tide of the election.
Yep.
On that point, I saw an interesting video. I don't have it pulled up because I didn't think I was going to talk about it, but on the fact of him being kind of a con man, it talked about how he has historically, especially from his presidency going forward, but even prior and other things, used different props and ways to try and convince people. And one of this particular video was talking about his large stacks of paper and how he has. If I find it, I'll throw it up. Or I'll send it to you guys, and we can throw it up in the links and chat later for people to watch for humor value. But anyway, he's used large stacks of paper to show things. Like he has a tweet of himself where he's signing his tax returns, and there's like a 5-foot stack of paper on his desk. Or at the end of or when he left early, the 60 Minutes interview, and he says, "Here's my health plan." He had Kayleigh McEnany bring it out, right? This giant book of paper. And there's been I don't know, half a dozen, if not more, other times in the presidency where he's done this, and the paper was just a show. It's kind of an interesting sidebar. So, all
right, there's the book, everybody. We're not getting paid for promotion, but go check it out if you're interested.
Malcolm, send us some monies for
Malcolm, send us some money, damn it.
Viewers. Malcolm, give us the cash money. No, it's really a good book. I mean, in it, just every single person. It's actually really interesting. I bet his advisors have read this book when they acknowledge, let's put a stack of paper out there. Because think about it, right? The famous experiment that really, he leverages a lot of the arguments in this book on. One of is the Stanford, experiment that regards, when they have you're told to press a button to electrify a person if they don't answer a question right, and something like 90% of the people will end up going all the way to the final charge.
Yep.
And even if they think they're going to kill someone. Now, what's interesting, what goes deeper in that is parts of this experiment. The individuals, 60 to 70% thought there was something off about it, but only so. For instance, they saw the megaphone of the guy's screams coming out. And it's like, well, that's weird. Why would they record the screams to this? They literally saw, like batteries and shit, like just taped places, and like, okay, that's odd, right? Like there was things that were clearly off. Like is he actually being electrocuted? Only 8% of people that did the experiment, whereas 80-something% truly believed that there was something off. Like there was they had doubts. 80 to 90% of people had doubts if the person was actually being electrocuted, but only 8% of people truly 100% without any doubt believe that the man was like, no, this is all fake. There's no way he's being shocked. So there's something to be said is like, even when things are suspicious, when we see, a person, like a recording of someone screaming, playing, and even when we see a stack of paper and they say, these are my tax plans, obviously, we can look at that and be like, there's no way. But actually, most people probably want to give that benefit of the doubt. Like, okay, maybe there are there, right? Maybe I'm like 70% unsure, but sure, that's Trump's tax plans. We can't look at it; it's just a stack of paper. So that stuff actually works. Like it truly, truly works.
Yeah, it does, and it's a lot of political showmanship on every side. And you see that during any sort of congressional hearings or anything like that where there's, I mean, it's the same kind of showmanship as a loaded question. You know, it's like, it sounds like you're really just grilling into Mark Zuckerberg when really you're teasing out something that's maybe a small impropriety when you're making it sound like it's the end of the republic as we know it.
Who's going to believe that that is his goddamn tax return? Are you kidding me?
A lot of people. It works.
You can clearly see the stacks. You can see like the different sheafs that were pulled out from the printer.
Yeah. or they were just, they're blank reams and you can see where they stacked each blank ream on top of each other.
Right. Yeah.
It's interesting because objectively we're able to look at this, but plenty of people can't look at this objectively because think about this way, for you and I, we generally dislike Trump, right? So it's easy for us to be like, oh yeah, there's no way. But for those in the true middle to right, not that you're not in the true middle, but the right middle and over, when you look at that, because you like the guy, there's an easier willingness to say, all right, something's definitely off about that, but sure.
Yeah, so Tim, I wanted to talk about that one right there. That's obviously he doesn't have the regulations there.
Right. This one is on purpose, right? This one I brought up as an example of it's clear that this one is to make a point.
Right.
And I don't have a problem with that. Right. Yeah. It just, this one I thought I'd bring up because it was part of that video. And I actually didn't think, I don't think there's anything wrong when you're like, hey, I'm using this to demonstrate something. Where I think it's an issue is when you try and pass something off to be factual when it isn't.
Right. I mean, you're just saying you don't like lying or exaggerating. Yeah, I agree. 100%. So let me bring up my story because we kind of skirted around it and then we'll get back to it. We're kind of talking about it already. So I want to just bring this up so that we can talk about this. So Donald Trump supporters can get free food at Kentucky restaurants owned by the same couple, but there's a catch, right? And so this is an article about restaurant owners who will give you a free meal if and only if you bring in your Trump paraphernalia and give it to them. Right? So the idea behind it being, hey, we know you dumbasses are sorry for Trump. Why don't you just give us your stuff? Yeah,
that's what I was going to ask. Are they collectors or are they trying? Is it like
so their stated goals are they're trying to promote unity, right? They're trying to be like, this is a genuine olive branch. Like, all right, it's all over. Come give us your Trump stuff. It's done. But so I wanted to use this to illustrate a point. And I know we're going to see a bunch of this. And I even started hearing some of it tonight. There's going to be this massive push from everybody on the left or the center who hates Trump or anybody who hates Trump. There's going to be a massive push over the next couple of years. Like, hey, don't you feel like a piece of shit for supporting Trump? Huh? Now that you've had some time away from him, you fucked up, didn't you? And there's going to be a lot of that, and it's going to probably get super annoying.
Probably.
About as annoying as it was when Trump won, and the people that supported him were like, "Ha, see." So I think it's. I agree. I hope I don't do it. I hope people don't do it in general. But I mean, that's kind of human nature. The see, I told you so thing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
This is I realize this is a one-off olive branch example, but what it reflects is, yeah, you're going to have the annoying people on my side of the aisle kind of being like, how dare you have support? You should ask for repent, but political repentance. But what you are going to see a lot in the next coming months, year, especially, I would say up until 2025, we're going to see the fight for the Republican Party soul, like whether or not the Republican Party is going to be that of, actually, before I was being a little kinder to Lindsey Graham, but apparently Lindsey Graham's a little bit more towards populist now. So is the Republican Party going to be that? Is the Republican Party going to be that of populism, or is it going to be that of conservative values and conservative politics? I hope it's the latter. I hope you're more of the Rand Pauls, Mitt Romneys, John McCain's, or some variation of that. But yeah, you are going to see that. You are going to see Republicans trying to forget Trump, especially, and I think really where this is going to come into play is is how will conservative media such as Fox News, how will Trump be articulated in the upcoming months, years, especially if he runs for re-election, and what that's going to look like. I think that's going to choose truly. 2024 is going to choose the soul of the Republican Party. I think that's where it's going to be a long battle, but we are seeing a change in party systems a little bit right now.
Right. So, I mean, that's an interesting way to say that the Republican. I mean, to say that in a less moralistic way is to say that the Republican Party, that both parties undergo shifts sometimes, right? So, it appears to me that the parties remain stable along a stable platform for a certain amount of time. I don't know, 30 years, I think, before parties significantly change, and there's micro variations there within. And we've talked about this before, but I think the Republican Party is in the middle of or beginning to transition into a different coalition than the George Bush era, right? Totally. So the polite neocon Republicans of the early 2000s, the 1990s, and before that, I think that's all going away. And I think, to put it in the terms that we would favor, I think meld between the populism and the old conservatism is an appropriate thing, right? So if we had, for example, if we had Trump, but an articulate Trump, that's exactly what we would want. An articulate person who was governing the way that Trump was.
Do you think it was his articulation that was bad?
Absolutely.
Or his personality?
I've said to you multiple times, if you separate Trump's rhetoric from the way that he governs, he's actually a pretty good president.
Rhetoric isn't being articulate or not. Articulation is purely the ability to speak or not what you actually are saying.
Okay, I understand that, but my contention this whole time is that you guys don't understand him. If he was articulate, then you would understand him more.
Right, and our contention is that you are reading into what he's saying and deciding for yourself what he's trying to say, whereas everybody else is seeing him say what he's truly saying, which is something else, which is exactly, I mean, if you look at the stop the count comments, right, that we talked about before, like, we don't agree that it's a matter of we don't understand him. We do understand him, and we don't like what he's saying. Like, to me, the rhetoric is...
We fundamentally disagree on that.
If you look at him on the coronavirus thing, when we've talked about this before, like, my big contention with him is not that he didn't do more, federal shutdowns or federal mandates or anything like that. I actually am okay with states being in control a lot of that stuff. It's more from a federal like fathership figure, like, stand up and say and do what you know and science is saying is the right thing. Like, fucking come out and say, hey, yes, masks are important, wear them, rather than continuously being like, yeah, I wear a mask, but there's people that say they don't really work. Like, why say that, right? Like, there's no point for that. That's the kind of rhetoric I'm talking about, not about misunderstanding him and trying to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, well, he's actually wearing a mask though, so it's fine. It's not fine, man. He constantly is putting doubt in there and making people question what is right and real and factual, and that's the issue I've had with him.
I would say too that and when we say Trump's a good president without the rhetoric, what are we defining as good? Someone who got their policies across, or someone who's able to compromise? And I believe the best politicians are those who are able to find. Obviously, you're never going to have a president that comes in and only compromises, right? That's problematic in and of itself, because that defeats the point of an ideological nature of the party. However, I'd say someone who can unify. Look, here's the reality: George Bush is not someone I would vote for. I would argue that he made mistakes, but socially he had pretty good support throughout the emerging stages of 9/11, right? Like, George Bush ultimately
had the highest approval rating of any president ever. I think it was 91%.
He was a unifier, right? He was a compromiser at that too. He went through certain processes. There's actually immigration reform was going to go through that would have been very compromised had 9/11 never happened. So things that would have protected DACA, like, these are things that would have happened under Bush's administration had 9/11 never occurred. So I would say Bush was a great president, not because I agree with him ideologically. In contrast, I disagree with 85-90% of the things he probably believes in. However, he was a compromiser to a point while still being ideologically true to his republicanism. And so I feel that Trump is not a good president because he failed to compromise and unify. Obama, I think, is the flip end of Bush. I mean, the reality is the dude did do some compromising. The Affordable Care Act is a compromise bill. As much as the Republicans want to hate it, it is such an emphasis on private insurance because of Republicans. So,
But let me come in there and explain why compromise is not necessarily a thing that the right desires, right? So, especially in the last 3 years, a lot of the guys I listen to have articulated this point, which is we are conservatives, which means we sort of stood where the country stood, right? So right now we stand where the country stood, rather, as in we hold these particular. What's that?
Said in the past. You're
correctly in the past. Yes, we stand in the past. Generally speaking. So we are for the way that things have been, generally speaking. Now, compromise means to move away from the way that things were, right? So, for example, if you compromise on abortion rights, a lot of Republicans believe that now you are compromising so you can kill some babies, right? So if you compromise on government-mandated healthcare, well, now you have part of healthcare being run by the government, which is something that we don't want. So, like, compromise is always in the direction of progressivism away from conservatism.
I would disagree only to a point. If we're, to get into the weeds of this, is, I think, we have to look at things first and foremost how they actually are, not how they ought to be, right? And so no matter what, Republicans can't stop the country from changing. Democrats can't stop the country from maintaining, where it currently is. It is a tug of war, but I would think it's a little bit more complex than just a simple, you pulling one rope and us pulling the other. It's a bit more complex in nature. I would also say, that is true, and I would say that what you just described, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what you just described, I think, is true of the intellectuals in the Republican Party. It's true of your George Bush Republicans. I would definitely argue that the populist Republicans are a bit more neoliberal, a bit more to the extent that they even have an ideology. Trumpism.
I don't know if we have the same definition of neoliberal.
Neoliberal is like to me, it's reducing markets or reducing government control of markets to an extreme.
Oh, for me, neoliberal means, let's say, Obama era Democrat, like just hard blue Democrat, not necessarily progressive, but.
No, I would. The terminology for it is no. In that case,
neoliberal, favoring policies that promote free market capitalism, deregulation, and reduction in government spending.
Holy crap!
Neoliberalism is much more populist in nature. It's let's let things regulate themselves. Let's take ourselves out of the economy for the government. People probably called Obama a neoliberal because he people think that those who are getting involved more in international trade are neoliberal because international trade typically becomes very challenging to regulate. But domestically, I would say that Trump is definitely a neoliberal in terms of domestic policy. And I would also argue certain things like economic policies. Trump definitely wasn't going back to the way it was. Look at the Trump tax plan. I mean, I know we talked about it, right? But the reality is it boosted our deficits, caused an increase in our national
reduction in taxes. That's a very right wing thing.
Yeah, but I think of it as I'm all for reducing taxes if we also reduce spending or if we mitigate in some way.
We both agree on that, but the tax plan itself is a tax cut. It's a tax cut. I mean,
but it's kind of like Hemingway's iceberg theory, right? It's like, the very tip of it is a tax cut, though, but the rest of it underneath the surface is something a little bit more insidious.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of go back to what you were saying before, Nathan, on the conservative, we agree. We want to stay kind of where we're at. We think what's happened or how it's worked in the past is better, kind of thing. And I know we've had this conversation several times on stream and off stream. And is it Weinstein that you quote sometimes in saying that he there's somebody that you talk about that says that kind of helped you see the importance of having both progressive,
the left and the right, yes.
And
that doesn't necessarily mean progressive and conservative. That that means somebody who looks out for the poor guy and somebody who looks out for the good of the economy or the flourishing people.
Okay, yeah. So I think I had taken what you're saying is like, without a guy trying to pull us in the direction of progression and a guy trying to pull us in the direction of conservatism, then we would go too far in one direction or the other, right? You need a balance of both to make sure you progress where you should and whatever.
Yeah.
And I like that. I think that's important. But I also think that compromise is important because of that for both sides, right? Without compromise, we would never progress at all. I would argue to say you're not that conservative if you compare yourself to an Amish person, right? Like
yes, obviously.
But to the point being, like, if you truly believed in pure conservatism, then you would go back to that or even further past them, right?
No, not necessarily.
Why is it that the things that we did in 2000 or 1980 or 1970, what year ever you pick and say these are the rules that are the best ones, we shouldn't change these, right? Like that doesn't.
Right. That's why. Making conservative that kind of thing makes it tough because then you can say, well, you don't want things the way it was in 1850. Well, no, obviously we don't. Conservatives are just generally, we like the way that things are, right? We stand for the old ideas. We are more prone to standing for religion, which is some of the oldest ideas. We're more prone to standing for the Constitution, which is an old idea that we can hold on to. You know what I mean?
In 50 years or 100 years from now.
What's that?
50 years or 100 years from now, some time frame, right? People are going to look back, and the conservatives of that time frame are going to look back at your beliefs and say, God, obviously we don't want shit like that.
Yes, correct.
So that realization, I think, is important in understanding that compromise is important. And a president that can bring people together and get all of the people to talk and come to a decision that meets the majority is important.
Yes, but once again, I'm just going to point out that there exists a conservative party, and many of them are more conservative than me. And they have values that they want to hold on to. And what you are telling them, right? So by the very nature of it, conservatives are generally the status quo, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
By the very nature of it, conservatives are generally the status quo. And to say compromise is a good thing means that you are moving them away from that, right? Progressives are always reaching for the next thing. That is the nature of progressivism. So it doesn't matter where you are. If you are progressive, you are trying to move the Overton window, or you're trying to move where the country is in a certain direction.
Yeah, but compromise isn't good for progressives either.
Just because you have a new idea does not make it good, and it's very hard to come up with a good new idea. And it's sort of conservatives that.
Well, I would say to that point, when we talk about,
tell that to Elon Musk. That boy's full of good new ideas.
Again, let me just reiterate real quick, Chris, and then I'll let you go. I do see the value of both sides. I'm not a pure conservative, right? So dispositionally, I'm a conservative. I feel the conservative arguments a lot more innately in me, but rationally, I understand that without progressives, you don't ever get those new ideas, and you do need them, and you need to examine them thoroughly before you adopt them or reject them, as it were. But go ahead, Chris.
I would simply say to that, it's, I believe that if somebody is unmoving, then I'm going to quote former Senator Chris Dodd, who is actually more likely criticizing liberals on this, but there's a place for advocacy and there's a place for politics, and politicians are meant to compromise. So what you're describing to me is a conservative activist, right? An advocate, someone who is advocating as an activist on the values of conservatism. There's no place in politics for that. They obviously exist in politics, just as those on the far left exist in politics. However, at the end of the day, the country moves. Regardless of the direction, the country has to move. There's things that need to be reformed. So, there's also something to be said about, and I know this is not what you're saying, but a lot of people on the left interpret, certain talking points you shared recently about, we want to maintain the status quo, we want to go back to older values, and you mentioned religion. Well, some of the other things, I know, again, this is not what you're saying specifically, but a lot of the left and middle left will interpret that as, all right, well, when we actually look at the history of our country in a non-revisionist lens, right? and that's not to say that we are. We can go in a rabbit hole with that, but revisionist lens, as in, there's some serious flaws in our country's history that has not provided opportunities for everybody. Jim Crow era, we've already been down these rabbit holes, but redlining, denial of bank loans to Black veterans, or VA loans, denial of the GI Bill to Black veterans of World War II era. It goes beyond this too. The reality is the country was a great place the past 150 years for anybody that was in the. I'll even take race out of this. Anybody who was upper middle class or middle class.
Yeah.
But for those who weren't, in the left would say the white middle class, which I would agree with. But I'll just take that out for there. Besides that, look at the freaking Chicago meat industry. Look at any industry, every single industry in the early 1900s. You literally had people working in a meat factory, get their arm chopped off on a machine, and they get fired for it, dude. Like, this was a common practice, right? So when we say we want to go back to things, we want to unregulate, we want to neoliberalism, that's a very dangerous thought to me, because there's certain things in the left would perceive as that certain things that do need revision. There's certain things that do need to be edited, that need to be adjusted. For example, new bipartisan bill. Look at opportunity zones. Opportunity zones are a way to combat redlining. This is a progressive idea introduced by Cory Booker that got immediate traction on both sides. And Trump even's like, yeah, opportunity zones, I let it. But actually, if you look at the first person to propose opportunity zone legislation, not to give credit to the left, but revisionism, progressivism is important. I also believe it's important to not look at history. I'm using revision as two separate definitions, by the way, but I think it's important to look at history in a revision, in a non-revisionist lens. We need to look at it for what it was. And yeah, there's parts of this country that made it exceptional. We got to where we are today because of our exceptionalism in our history. There's a lot of dark moments, a lot of enduring, prolonged dark moments that I think that's where progressivism comes in to say, all right, maybe we should allow gay marriage, right?
Right. Maybe we should get rid of slavery. Maybe we should get rid of Jim Crow. Maybe we should get a Civil Rights Act passed. Yeah. So let me just say, let me try to. So it's very difficult to articulate sort of the purpose of the left and the right if you were to believe in such a thing, right? And then Tim and you are rightfully trying to pin me down onto, well, what about this and what about that? So let's put it this way. So it is the job. Let's see if I can do this. Let's see what you guys think about this. It is the job of the right to figure out why it has worked so far, what has gotten us here and what has gotten us here well. It is the job of the left to figure out what has not been working and how to fix it. And it's the job of the two of them to examine that question together.
I like that definition.
It's not just about what isn't working and needs to get fixed, but it's also what is working but can be done better. Right?
Sure.
Like there's always there's that's
sure, but that would be like a solution with a small problem, and then you fix that small problem, and then it gets better. But I mean, that's semantics. But yes, we essentially.
Well, I mean, like riding horseback worked for us. It got us around. It did the job. We got from one place to the other. We explored the entire country that way.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we need automobiles? Well, because they do the job better, right? So it's not that there was a problem per se, that it didn't work. I mean, it could
sure
be done
was.
better.
There's the problem that I need to get to the hospital, but it's going to take me an hour on horseback or 15 minutes in a car.
I need to get there faster. Yeah, I mean,
problem solved.
Great, right?
That's a good example of
quantum entanglement. From now on, we're just going to poof.
Well, that's innovation as a product of like a government providing the means for an environment of innovation to occur in the first place, which like obviously did not occur in like 1900s China, where it's like they stagnated, whereas a couple centuries ago China was the leading technological like country in the world. When we look at what China was able to do in the past couple thousand years, but then we kind of
century or like a millennia or two ago,
thousands of years, but then we kind of shoot by when it comes to Zoom when it comes to our industrial revolution. So yeah, I really like the definition you gave. I think that would be like a beautiful way. I would love if our Congress was actually like that, where it's like, yeah, the right is...
Well, like you said, there's no place for advocacy in Congress. And I'll go even further on that. There's no place for philosophy in Congress. Those people were elected for a very specific reason by specific people to do a job. And that their job is not to tease. Their job is not to debate each other and talk, and for them personally to figure out how the philosophy of the country should work and debate those kinds of questions. So we look for that in our leaders, but it shouldn't be there. Those kind of conversations need to take place in podcasts like this, or Joe Rogan, or Ben Shapiro, or Cenk Uygur, for God's sake, God help us.
Sure, I think it makes sense for our elected officials to have philosophies that they want to roll out, and it's up to the electorate to make sure that
right.
that's being mitigated, and it's up to us to make sure elections are competitive enough to make sure that people are able to get in that right. So what I'm saying is local elections are uncompetitive to a point, right? So you get some weird people getting elected to city council.
Yeah, that's true.
Board of
More people running unopposed. Yeah.
Yeah. So we need competitive elections, but it's up to the people once an election truly has the means of being competitive to choose what ideology they want represented. But I do fully agree. Yeah, you're not meant to be an activist inside Congress. You're meant to be a thought leader to me. And a thought leader is I like Jennifer Ocasio-Cortez for as much as the right dislikes her. She's a thought leader. And she's knows her stuff. Paul Ryan, to do the inverse, was a thought leader. People on the left really dislike him. He knew his stuff. So I think that's the type of stuff I like to see in Congress. Hamilton, Franklin, obviously those are the easy ones.
Alexander Hamilton.
Hell yeah.
I'm not going to miss my shot.
I
like that.
Time, guys.
That's like the only musical I like, but ironically,
I've never seen it, but my wife listens.
Like it.
I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen it yet, but my wife listens to the soundtrack all the time. So yeah, I get. I want to watch it. I just haven't got to it. Chris, do you have a news article, or I have one that I think? Okay, I got one I want to put up after you. Then you're gonna have to answer it for me.
I'll be quick, but this has been a fun conversation so far. So let me dive into
we vortexed pretty hard on that one.
Let me dive into this. I'm pulling it up. Hang on 1 second. Actually, you know what? You go ahead because I
think there's some sex life jokes in here about you not being able to get it up there. But
no.
Got him.
No, I did it. All right. So, this says House Democrats back Pelosi for another term as Speaker. Why? What my question is.
Is that recent?
Yeah.
Did they?
I don't understand this. My feeling is Pelosi is so unlikable, regardless of how good she is at being the Speaker of the House, which I don't necessarily think she is that good. She is absolutely unlikable. And I think it's important. We saw in the election, we lost seats in the House. I think people are not happy with some of the things that have happened there, and we need to be careful about who we put in charge and what face we're putting forward. And let's take a little bit of a cue from the public and say, hey, we need to make a little bit of a change here and do something different. Personally, if Pelosi was running for office and I had a chance to vote for her or against her, I would most likely vote against her if it was anybody but Trump running against her, right?
Hey, but she gave us that great quote about the running a glass of water with a D on it.
Yeah. To be fair, she did say I was a little bit mistaken. I know past podcast said she was going to be running again. I just looked up the older articles from 2018, which is when this happened. It's Pelosi actually explicitly said she would step down by 2022, and that was 2.5 years ago. So she's technically sticking through with exactly what she said, which is that by 2022. So the true litmus test for Pelosi is if she steps down in the midterm elections this year. That's going to be whether or not she kept her word. Is if this midterm election she steps down.
Does she have to? Is she Speaker until she decides not to be, or is she voted on by the House? I don't know how this process works.
Really good question. She's voted on by the Democrats within the House. So Democrats choose their majority leader. Republicans choose their leader. In this case, currently the minority leader, because they just simply don't have the majority in the House. And so if you guys Republicans split the House, then the minority speaker becomes the majority. But Pelosi, for what it's worth, basically has that position for as long as she wants. There's obviously dissenters, but the reality is internally, yes, Pelosi is a very powerful politician for the nation. Internally, the reality is she's had the Democratic Party like in line, in check. As the majority leader or minority leader, you basically are organizing your party. It's basically like, how much can you get your party to act as one person, one organized entity? And that's why Republicans have been so successful in the Senate. And so that's what Democrats basically are inside the House right now, is they are one unit. And that's powerful because, that basically that actualizes to a point the full power of the congressional branch of government, because, you now have the power to, as one person, 300 people acting as one, that collective energy to overpower or to supersede the other branches of government. And that's exactly how the Constitution is. They wanted, collective people. Now, granted, there's also deliberations behind the scenes. There's a bunch of other stuff. I'm simplifying this. It's not rainbows and butterflies. A bill doesn't. It's not like Pelosi comes out and like threatens to murder your family if like you don't sign on to a bill.
So is there any way that we can like keep her? So it sounds like maybe she's doing a really good job for what her job actually is behind the scenes. So is there any way we can like keep her doing that and have a designated hitter that actually goes out and speaks in public?
Yeah, she can be. It never happened, but she can become the majority whip. The whip has a job.
I was actually kidding, but damn, you have an answer.
Yeah, there actually happens to be such an office.
There does have. I don't know if you guys ever watched House of Cards, but Frank Underwood was the whip in the Senate, and so it's actually a really powerful job that works in tandem with the speaker or the minority leader. Both parties have a whip in the House and then in the Senate, so there's 4 whips in total, and that person's basically the responsibility is to know what all the vote counts are before every single bill comes forward. So their staff is meant to make sure that they know where every single person sits in terms of voting. And
Chris, let me ask you about something, because there was a couple podcasts ago where you were saying that the way that Mitch McConnell operates was that he wouldn't call things to the floor if he didn't think he had the votes. And my question to you is like, I don't know if it's a departure from the way that it was, but I mean, isn't that a smart way for him to operate? Like, regardless of which side you're on, Sure.
No,
why would you call a vote if you know it's not going to pass, unless to put people's names on the record?
Yeah, it's true. It's a good way to do it. It's not done. I don't understand the full problems with McConnell that people criticize him on, other than I know there's some pretty fair criticisms that so it's not as simple as just a bill goes to the floor. He's impacting like the markup process of bills. So it's before a bill can even be fully deliberated. It's like if he doesn't believe in the idea of a bill, it's not even going into markup. It's not even going into like backdoor deliberations, public backdoor, like committee hearings. And I think that's the problem that people are having with him.
Okay. Well, I mean, I can kind of see the issue, but at the same time, if the core idea is something he disagrees with and it's not going to get Republican votes, and he knows that, I can kind of understand. I can understand both sides on that. Like, especially if you hate the guy or don't like him, you can call him out for that. But to me, I don't see too big of a deal, because if he has the majority and he's not going to allow it to pass, it's not going to pass.
No, it does save some time. It does take away deliberations on certain things in a different environment. So keep in mind too, the Senate is kind of cool because the House floor gets really rowdy because you have hundreds of people, right? One bill, not even like filibustering, but one bill, if it hasn't been fully vetted in committees, and you have some group of representatives on the floor that are against it, they can really, not even with this as their main intention, but you can really hold up a bill because like hundreds of, whereas the Senate, you have like 100 people. So you can fit everybody in a room. And the reality is not everybody in a bill, you can be spoken on all day. So people can go speak on something, record it. It's not like you need to all be in the room right then speaking. But that is kind of a nice part of the deliberative body, is like being in a Senate with everybody there. There is something to be said about, extra deliberation. So I'm personally all for deliberation. I think that's but I realize that's not how things are being run right now. I'm sure it'll be different in the future. So
I'm sure. All right. Let me, that was a wonderful tangent. I don't even remember where that started, but we went 50 different directions. Oh yeah, Chris, you have something.
Okay, cool.
Right.
So I'm just gonna make it my whole
Ted
screen.
Cruz cause
But
ass.
basically, I wanted to talk about this because I think this is a very interesting overall process. So basically, Sherrod Brown calls out a
Is
Republican
he Ohio?
senator. I'm not sure where Sherrod Brown is.
It's really annoying me that neither of those people is Ted Cruz.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Well, these are the picture of the two, the instances.
None of the
Basically-
4 pictures there are Ted Cruz. Is driving me.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, basically, Republican senator is not wearing a mask, and Sherrod Brown decides to call him out for it. And the guy's like, "Excuse me, like I had my mask on a minute ago. I'm speaking at the podium. I don't need a mask," which is a fair point to make. Senator Cruz calls him an ass because Sherrod Brown calls the Democrat an ass because it's like, why are you? You're making a talking point. You're making a news clip, which is probably true. But to be fair,
Wait, unravel that for me. Who called who an ass first and then second?
So Ted Cruz calls Sherrod Brown an ass for calling out another Republican senator for not wearing a mask.
Okay.
U.S. social distance, right? Now I'll say this is I agree with I just want to share my thoughts on this because and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts too. I believe that first and foremost, the Republican senator, I believe Sullivan, without a mask, was safe by all definitions. He was far away from people. It was in the middle of a committee. It's not like this was a big hearing that everyone's watching.
Right.
I also believe that, so I believe Ted Cruz is kind of warranted typically. I will say this too, Republicans have been relatively pretty bad about putting their masks on right now. The Senate floor, in the Senate, not the House.
Mm-hmm.
The House requires everyone to have a mask right now. But Senate rules is it's a strong recommendation for everybody to have a mask. And so recently, it's actually has me really sad. Senator Chuck Grassley just contracted COVID from the Senate floor, basically, from the Senate House, right? Like, he wasn't wearing his mask in any of the committees that he was speaking at. He's a senator from Iowa. He was in the same room as other Republicans for a meeting that was behind the doors. We can assume he probably wasn't wearing a mask in that meeting, as are many other Republicans. And and that sucks because the dude's 88, 87 years old. And I actually really like Grassley. He's one of the top child welfare leaders in Congress right now. He's one of the only senators with a staffer designated just to child welfare. And dude's a Republican. And actually, he's probably going to have a hard time with COVID. He's in his late 80s. And I really like the guy, even if I didn't like the guy. But it's really sad to me because I believe that, one, wearing a mask as a politician, you're setting a tone. It's that rhetoric. It's like a social rhetoric. You're telling people, wear a mask, even though I don't need to wear a mask, I'm wearing it. Seeing imagery matters. Imagery matters so much. More than that, I really believe that Republicans have been a little bit relaxed on this politically. And we see this.
That's not very nice, Tim.
Yeah. No, I don't. I really
I'm just being a butt.
I know.
I'm being an ass.
I can pull a picture. I have a picture with Chuck Grassley. He's a good dude.
Listen, if Chuck Grassley dies, he's going to haunt you, Tim.
I don't believe him, Gus.
I ate donuts with Chuck Grassley.
Look, I've been watching the TV series Evil, and if you don't believe, then actually no, and that's where they can still haunt you. Damn it!
But no, I mean, it's just, Carson has COVID. A bunch of other people in Trump's cabinet has COVID. It's just sad to me. It's just really sad because it's real. People are dying. And it's getting worse again. So
I do feel bad for people, but at the same time, I feel bad for people that get it from people because if you choose to not wear a mask and you want to take that risk and you contract COVID, I mean, I feel bad for you because you're sick and you have health issues, right. But I don't feel like extra bad for you because you made a choice and that's your right. And I'm okay with that. Like, where I feel bad is if you made a choice that puts somebody else's life at risk, then I'm more concerned about those types of incidents. So
yeah, I generally agree with you, Tim. Pretty much.
Well, I think it comes down to not to get too caught up in this book I'm reading, but it's like this default to truth and this default to safety. It's like I'll give you an example. This past week, I had a really, really terrifying COVID scare. I had a student in my office a week ago, sat down right, a couple feet away from me. I was irresponsible. I asked him, oh, do you know anyone with COVID? all that good stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, like, I took my mask off, and she's like, is it okay if I take my mask off? I'm like, yeah, you know. And super irresponsible. I own that. I had my mask off. They had their mask off. They came back a couple days later. My fiance was in the office. All of us had our masks off. The following day, this student texts me, and they say, Chris, I am so sorry, and please forgive me. But I went in for a routine physical this morning, and before I went into the physical, they required that I do an instant COVID test, and I came back positive. And I just sat there looking at the text, and I'm like, oh my God, because by every definition, I should have had COVID at that point. I used her laptop. I was sanitizing my hands and all that, but breathing in the same room, I really, and I was terrified because I don't want my fiance to get it. We're healthy adults, but we.
Did you insert your USB drive?
No, that's not funny.
Did you get some malware?
I spent $300 on a COVID test, guys, because I needed to get an instant test. And
why did you have to spend $300?
Because I couldn't go another day without knowing because of my fiance's health and safety and my health and safety. And so I needed to know immediately. I went into the only place that was doing instant tests in my area within like 40 miles. And they basically were like, listen, we can give you a free instant test based on your insurance tomorrow, or you can pay $300 and go out of insurance and get it today. And I'm like, well, fuck it. I guess I'm paying $300. And thank God, by the grace of God, I tested negative. I have no idea how I tested negative. I straight up prayed. I was like, oh my gosh, thank God. Like, I must have just gotten like a free pass from like the powers that be. It's so easy.
Do you have a lot? Have you been involved or had a lot of people around you that have had it, or do you know of a lot of cases personally?
I do know a lot of cases. I've had my close friend, his whole family got it. They all recovered, thankfully. I know another person that I'm acquaintanced with that her dad died. I have a student that he informed me that another student who I know acquaintance-wise, he was a freshman when I was on student government. When I was a senior, he's now a senior. His dad just died of COVID. Whole family got it. So yeah, I know a lot of people that are getting it. People that are getting it.
That's interesting. Like a lot of the cases you've mentioned are like whole families that are getting it. And from my anecdotal evidence, right? So unfortunately, my wife's work has had multiple breakouts, and they've had, at any given time, 7, 8 people. Well, not any given time. At a few different times, 7 or 8 people out of the office that had it. And we had a couple pretty big scares. But I was just talking to her about this earlier in the week and also last week, and like almost all of those cases, 1 or 2, like the person that tested positive that she works with, then their whole family would go get tested, and none of their family would get it.
Yeah,
it's been like it's been really limited on how far it's spreading amongst the people that she knows and works with.
That's why I got tested so quickly, because to me it's like, all right, based on I was looking up, we don't know a lot about the virus, but we do know there's periods of it that's way more contagious than others. And so I knew that there was 3 or 4 days prior to the moment that I was in the office with my fiance and the student, that I was with the student. And I was like, all right, if I have COVID, it's from that first meeting, not the second one. And so it would test positive. And so that's why I paid for an instant test. I went in immediately. I needed to, because I was ready to sleep in my office. I was like, now about to I was like, if I test positive, there's a chance that my fiance is not positive. There's a high chance. And so what happens with some people, I just have to imagine, I'm not here, but I have to imagine that people went longer without testing initially until symptoms came up. And then because of that, they were contagious at a period of time where they were asymptomatic, which is where the virus actually sheds the most. My student,
listen, not to belabor the point, but do either of you have pre-existing conditions that are affected by COVID?
I do. So if I got it, it'd be really bad.
Does she?
Monkey.
What?
Does Carolyn?
Yeah, we both do. We both got some immune stuff.
All right. So, I suppose then I fully agree with you. But
the only thing I've got, I'm a bit of a chunky monkey.
All right. Well, okay. So, all right.
I'm 6'3", 270. Big dude.
Straight up chonker over here. Anyways, all right. So, So we've done quite a bit on that. I had a few things I want to do. I can't tell if I want to do. Okay. So I'm not going to do the election stuff that I have. I just want to do. We'll do a quick roulette. I have a few tweets for you. And because we were talking about whether AOC was a sort of a moderating figure last week, I'm going to read some of these.
I don't find her to be moderate in any sort of way.
Moderating, as in she wasn't spicy like Trump. So look,
she's spicy.
So let's do this. I'm going to read through these things, and from both of you, maybe a quick explanation. Yes or no? Does this raise the temperature or does this lower the temperature? Right, politically speaking.
Temperature
because we were saying that she
kind of dissection between the groups. Is that what you mean? Like the divide between the two sides? Is that kind of what you're referring to?
Yes. Does this raise the political climate temperature? Does this make things better? Does this bring us together? Or I'm sorry, I put two of those on the same thing. Or does it lower the temperature and make us come together and blah blah blah? Okay, so let's do that. And I will say, like right on the offset, it's not about whether these tweets are correct or not. Some of them, I think, especially if you're on her side and you give her the benefit of the doubt, they are correct. But do they help? Is the question. So these aren't all too bad, but these are just what I could come up in a short amount of time. So let's do this. Okay. So let me read this for you. So there's a little bit at the top. She's talking about croissants and stuff. I'll just read the bottom part. The bottom part's
raising the temperature. Croissants raise the temperature.
Croissants raising. Yeah, it makes you think of the French. I'll just read the bottom tweet. So GOP taking every tweet so earnestly, making my point for me. It's not an argument against the price of croissants. It's about the value of human life and human worth. She's referencing the top part of it, but it's this last line. But I guess that idea is foreign to them since their policies treat people as disposable anyways. Raise the temperature or lower the temperature?
Wait, was that their policy what?
Since their policies treat people as disposable anyway. Speaking of the GOP.
So obviously raises the temperature. I mean, when you start like coming out and speaking negatively about a group of people that way, regardless if it's true or not, I'm not saying it is. I'm just regardless if she thinks
right. I'm not talking about whether it's true or not. Obviously, I disagree.
The way she's approaching it is, I mean, it's not helping.
Chris, what do you think?
It's a bit incendiary.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Next one.
I actually remember
that's as much as you're getting from him.
Remember that? I remember all of these actually, or most of them, because I browsed Reddit and it's all lefties on there. Anyways. I don't want to do this one. No, forget about that. Oh yeah, she called a reporter a misogynist. Crap, I actually did want to do that one.
Let's hear it.
I just exited out of it. I didn't even tab away from it. I straight up exited out. There was a reporter remember the scandal like really early on. Some reporter said, "Hey, a staffer sent this picture to me. This doesn't look like she's dressed as a person who's struggling financially." You remember that?
Yeah.
Did they even call it like clothing gate or some bullshit like that? I forget. But the point is that what she said back. So in that one, I'm kind of on her side 100%. Like fuck off with how AOC dresses. Like seriously, go away. But she then fired back. She called him a misogynist, right? So I mean, like you might even think he's a misogynist, but where's the proof of it? Like, is calling this reporter a misogynist? Is it accurate? Is it helpful? Is it true?
I think it's diving into the fact that the reality is we're three dudes, so we have not experienced what it's like.
Listen, man, if you believe something, speak up for it.
You don't know me.
We don't know what it's like to be a woman in 2020 in the United States and what they go through on the day to day. So I imagine her calling him misogynist. It's pretty obnoxious. Why are we?
I agree.
Of all the things that you can call, it kind of comes to this. The reality is women receive different criticisms than men do, even when they're ideologically the same. There's plenty of dudes in Congress. There's a senator.
Hold on. Let me interrupt because we don't have a lot of time. So I'm not asking about whether these are accurate or not, or whether she's correct. I'm saying, does it lower the temperature or raise the temperature to call the reporter a misogynist in this context?
I'll say short raises the temperature, but she has every right to raise the temperature. She doesn't need to be docile and like passive and be like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I right. She has every right to be like, hey, fuck you. I actually thrifted this, but also, you know what? Go like.
Yeah, I would say in this case especially, sure.
I think it's okay to clap back and slap a tweet.
Yeah, the clap back. That's the term I had to use to find some of these tweets was AOC claps back.
They're good. She has some good clap.
I know. It's great. But, okay.
He has some good clap backs.
Lower the temperature. Okay. All right. Here's another one here. So she quote tweeted somebody. She's responding to them. She said, "Hey, Rep Cheney, since you're so eager to, quote, educate me, I'm curious. What do you call building mass camps of people being detained without a trial? How would you dress up DH's mass separation of thousands of children at the border from their parents? Is that tone something that's going to bring down the temperature or raise the temperature? Regardless of whether she's correct or not."
The tone. It's just words. You added the tone.
So the stuff that I emphasized, she emphasized. There's quotes around the things I said, quote, and then there's the you is all caps. So what do you call building? Like that's all caps. So she wrote it like this.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did not mean.
Yeah,
I'm sure she would agree with the tone too.
It keeps the temperature up, but I'm all here for it because this is the type of like she's speaking her mind, but in obviously a heated way. I think politics are okay to get heated, but in a non like, grab them by the pussy type of way.
Right. Yeah. But okay. So apply that to Trump though.
So
like all the forget about the one. Okay. So maybe not the one that you just mentioned, but Trump is speaking some of the truths that the conservatives would like out there in an incendiary way. And I would say that I don't like that. I would rather that he spoke them in an articulate and temperature cooling manner.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the point is, right? I don't know about Chris, but I don't want AOC to be president. Not that I think
please no.
Not that I think her voice needs to be silenced or anything, but I also don't think that she needs to be the loudest voice on the street either.
There's a place for AOC in the House, maybe the Senate one day. I couldn't imagine AOC. I'm sure we'll see AOC in the Senate, but
all right. No, I won't belabor the point then. So I just wanted to, it's something I wanted to follow up from last week where, I wanted to point out AOC and not just her, but a lot of people in the squad, they're not really contributing to the unity, right? As much as we think that they are, or maybe that you might think that they are.
Sure. I can agree on the sentiment as I've spoken before on compromise. I believe that the four of them are definitely a bit more incendiary. I think they also, I'll say this, not as like, not to give myself an easy pass, but there is a sense of whenever there's a strong majority where like dissent is an option, you'll see people like be more willingness to have like extreme views. There's a privilege right now, right? AOC, Rashana Tlaib, you have
Ilhan Omar.
Yeah, you have Representative Omar. There's actually, an opportunity for them, and I guess I would do the same if I was in the House right now, where they can speak their minds, they can vote against Democratic bills, because no matter what the bills pass, even if they were to vote against something, because it's not left enough. Bernie did the same thing when Democrats had the majority, right? When Democrats had the majority in the Senate, Bernie would definitely vote against Democrats because he can. If they ever change, if you have a minority, close minority, that's where the minority whip comes in and meets with the AOC in the office. What do you want? What bill do you want us to put through? Or there's absolutely no way you can vote against this because you will actually kill the bill because the Republicans will vote over it. So I think that they're saying these things because they kind of can, but I also believe there's a political privilege here. If the House flipped or if AOC went into the Senate, you'd see a very different AOC. Not entirely, her soul would still be there, but you'd see a different AOC in her composure.
Maybe. She's trying to primary people though. All right, we keep going on these tangents.
Well, look at Ted Cruz right now. Look real quick. Look at Ted Cruz. He in the majority in the Senate right now, super majority Republicans. That same privilege exists. Ted Cruz is totally gone off cap. He's doing the clapbacks on Twitter too, which is actually kind of funny. I appreciate Ted Cruz clapbacks. This is a very different Ted Cruz than we saw. I would argue that if Republicans flip back to the minority, if Georgia, actually flips totally with the Senate elections, then you would see a different Ted Cruz going forward again. You would, because you no longer could be extremist because you don't have that room to do that anymore.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We did a lot of that. Tim, what do you got there? And then we got to move over to Mueller.
It's Biden sniffing Idaho.
I was going to say that, that's just something I came up with. I was like, Joe Biden sniffing Idaho. So
yeah, I saw
there
that.
It is. Like same brainwave.
Thought it was hilarious. And once you see that shit, now every time you look at the map, fucking Biden sniffing Idaho, man.
All right, Chris, what's your professional political analysis of Joe Biden sniffing Idaho?
It's not actually Joe Biden. It's
obviously it's green Joe Biden.
It's just another.
So that's what we're going with, huh, Chris? Yeah. All right. I bet there's no voter fraud either.
All white men look the same. All old white dudes all the same. Do you put Alex Trebek, Joe Biden, Anderson Cooper next to each other? You can't tell the difference.
Yeah, fair enough.
What kind of?
Yeah, I saw that today.
What is that?
What?
Did you see that district?
Did they spill ink on a map? They're like, we'll make that a district. Like, how does that become a district?
That's bad. That's
fun. Gerrymandering. I don't know why they need to do that. They don't. The state's going to go red no matter what. Anyways.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have any quick ones, so I'm gonna call it quits on mine.
All right. So unless there's something you want to show, Chris, I thought we would dive into the Mueller.
With Mueller.
Mueller.
Yeah. So again, from the beginning. So I know this is super old stuff. I mean, the most recent stuff was, I think, the beginning of 2019. I think that's when the Mueller report finally came out and people were talking about it. So this is super old, but we've clashed on it a bunch of different times, and I've been told by credible sources with red beards that I'm wrong about this. So I thought we'd just do a segment on this. It looks like, we're not going to do like a full hour and a half on it. So, we're not going to bore too many people. So, all right, how do we want to do this? So the Mueller investigation or the Russiagate in general. So I've been told that what? So let's start. So Tim, you seem to have been pushing back most forcefully on this. So Trump gets investigated for Russia collusion for a couple of years. Robert Mueller finally puts out a report, and the report says what?
The report says that there was no conclusive evidence. Let me say it another way: that there wasn't enough evidence to say that he committed a crime. So
okay, so tell me why you phrase it that way.
Because of the way that the report reads and how I guess the law reads, and I'm trying to look at my notes here on this. So for them to find him guilty, not on the obstruction charge, right, but on the collusion and conspiracy charges. A couple things, I guess, because of those specific charges. I'm not a lawyer, so it's only from what I've read.
Let's break that down. So, okay, so for people who are watching, the Mueller report was looking at two very big questions, right? So there had been a counterintelligence investigation opened into Carter Page, who was a member of Trump's presidential campaign before he was elected president. That morphed and spread into a sort of like a campaign-wide investigation that went on. That morphed into the Mueller investigation, which lasted for a couple of years, maybe 3 years, and culminated in Robert Mueller putting out what is known as the Mueller report. He was looking at two major questions. He was looking at, did Trump collude with the Russians to steal the 2016 campaign?
It wasn't only on Trump. It was on the campaign as well. It was Trump's campaign as the target. Trump is obviously part of that. But it wasn't purely targeted at Trump.
Correct. Okay.
I think that's an important distinction as well, because a lot of people think this was a like purely a witch hunt to try and go and target Trump and say, hey, can we impeach him? Can we get him out of office? We're using this as a tool to go against the president, and it wasn't that.
Okay. And then the other question that he was looking at was, did Trump obstruct justice? Did Trump hamper the Mueller investigation or any of the investigations into the various allegations against his campaign?
Yeah.
So, all right. With that being said,
the reason I word it that way is because if you read through the report and there's some specific, segments that you can get out of it that aren't redacted, hence my background, right? The majority of the report is redacted. To be fair, I have not read through the report. It's 400 pages, or I don't know.
Neither have I.
So I've read as much as I can from summaries and stuff. But there's clear evidence that the Trump campaign worked with Russia to help his campaign. There's clear evidence on that. What there isn't clear.
I'm gonna disagree with that. So before we get into
I understand disagree, but let me finish because I want to answer your question real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
The reason I was specific in saying that they didn't find enough information to charge them, or however I worded it, is because I guess based on what I've read, it seems like for collusion and conspiracy, you actually have to know you're committing a crime, and they weren't able to prove that the people involved knew what they were doing was illegal. So, as an example, Jared Kushner and I have it in my notes. I've got like 4 pages of notes, so I'll find it. But Jared Kushner and several other Trump issues, Trump people met with Russian intelligence agents in the Trump Tower during the election. Right. So these things happened. These meetings happened.
Yep.
These topics were talked about. There's emails that show why they were talking, what they were talking about. That the Trump campaign expected that these meetings would benefit the campaign and improve his chance for presidency. So there's evidence that shows that his campaign was indeed intently and purposefully working with Russia to try and advantage his campain.
Okay.
Where they fell short,
I disagree with that, but let's leave it at that. Just real quick, I just want to go to Chris.
Yeah.
And so, Chris, what's your take on the results of the Mueller investigation, or just generally the Trump-Russia collusion scandal in general?
Sure. So I first and foremost, I believe that the major takeaway, Russia, without a doubt, interfered in our election. And I do want to preface that too, because I've heard a lot of people that contrary to belief, I have a couple of the Republicans, and I've heard from all Republican friends of mine that are not connected to one another, and so that leads me to believe there's certain talking points existing out there. And lo and behold, I go Google this, I find these talking points. It's propaganda at work. People are conflating and saying, "Oh, Democrats were like, Russia interfered with the election, so how are they turning around and saying here?" Well, it's actually no one ever said that Russia hacked our election. Russia didn't change the sanctity of the validity of the votes. It's that Russia influenced votes through propaganda. So that's very different than a voting machine, being hacked. It's very different than someone like burning a bunch of ballots, which isn't happening.
Yep.
It's
and people do need to realize that. Let me just reach out real quick and help you out with that. So from somebody on the right. So I was all up in this stuff for a couple of years. I mean, this was my bread and butter for a very long time. So people, if you are on the right, you do need to understand that in 2016, Russia was not hacking machines. That's not how it works, right? That's actually very hard to do because most of them aren't connected to the internet. Most of them, just for various different reasons, it was not electronic sort of hacking of the machines. What it was a sustained campaign of, say, mostly Facebook ads, just generally ads that groups would take out that were pro-Trump, right? And it did happen. But the scale of it is...
they convinced you to vote a certain way versus hacking the vote and changing it afterwards, right?
Yes. And the impact of that campaign is almost impossible to quantify, right? You can look at how many people saw the advertisements, how many people retweeted them or shared them, but it's difficult to say. For example, if you're retweeting those things, you're voting for Trump anyways, and are those things actually swaying votes? It's very, very hard. I'm not just saying that to say,
Sure.
they didn't have an impact or something like that. But is it going to be very hard to quantify?
So just to
I
wrap
agree,
up,
it's hard to
I
quantify,
totally-
but I think it had an impact.
just to hit the last points that I have is that I think this also goes a little bit deeper. It's Russia didn't just create propaganda to influence moderates to vote for Trump. It also was to disenfranchise people from voting, and it also was there was also plenty of ads that were proven to be put out to make Hillary voters not want to vote, make people want to vote for Jill Steiner, Gary Johnson on both sides of the aisle. Russia's goal was, in a sense, to get Trump elected, but deeper than that, and this, I would say, they succeeded, and the most part, was to divide our country, and it was to create political rifts, and they kind of have. I would say in the past 4 years, we've seen more political rifts than in a long time. Finally, just some fleeting thoughts. I'm pretty sure I tend, my gut tells me that, there most likely was an explicit collusion between the campaigns. I do feel that if Trump became knowledgeable of, or if anytime their campaign became knowledgeable of things going on in Russia, they did nothing to deter it, but they weren't the ones saying, yes, let's do this. But also, finally, just from research and whatnot, there are some shady, campaign members, cabinet members that seems like, all right, they had a meeting with George, whatever, Apple, met with
Papadopoulos.
Lied about something. It does not sit well with me that people are in prison right now for lying with the FBI. I feel like that is a really, callous charge. It's like, these people weren't arrested because of collusion. They were arrested because they were put on trial and then they said the wrong date, or maybe they're covering something up, right? Maybe they're not. But to me, it's
some of them were probably deliberate lies, but I would say the point still stands.
Yeah, they probably shouldn't be in prison for it.
I want to put a feather in the cap of the thing about, like, did Russia influence our election? Putin.
Let's talk about that in a second. Let me
I just want to close it off. Putin said they did it.
I know. Everybody knows they did it. So if you're on the right and you don't know that they did it, they did it.
Yeah, it's not a question, right? It's just they didn't. To your point, they didn't hack anything. They just did it through propaganda manipulation. But they purposely did it. Putin admitted to it.
Correct. Okay, so my view on the whole thing is that it's pretty much spelled out in the Mueller report. There was no conspiracy or no collusion, and there was not enough evidence to show obstruction of justice. There was some, but there was not enough to convict. And to me, I care almost nothing about that because I'm not worried about. So since his first part said there, so like I'm mildly worried. I'm not completely not worried, but the first part of the thing says, nope, we don't have any evidence, or we don't have enough evidence to say that he colluded. Basically, we spent $40 million and we can't prove that he did it. So he pretty much didn't do it. So Trump was basically obstructing nothing. He was whatever line he was towing it because he was frustrated about an investigation that he knew was fake, right, or false, or not going to turn anything up. So, that's kind of my point. We can delve more into that, and obviously we'll talk about all that stuff. But as far as Russia winning the election for Trump, there's no, like I said, it's very hard to quantify what impact Russia had. But I have not seen any analysis that has even posited that Russia was able to sway the election in Trump's favor. The margins were too large.
But Russia is responsible for hacking the DNC and Clinton emails and servers and releasing that information and a lot of that stuff that came out right before the election, and that was a huge swing. So I don't want to say that they are responsible. I can't say that, and I don't know that, but I do think that it played a major impact, and it could be responsible or it couldn't be. But the bottom line is, like, if you really look at it, Trump didn't win by that much, right? Biden is also not, like, although the electoral vote numbers, if you look at them, they look like a lot. most of the states were very close, and the same thing
Yep.
happened in Trump's election. So it doesn't take a whole lot to swing the election one way or the other, and that's why I think that it very well could have been a deciding factor. But is the fact that a third-party country is propagandizing our populace to try and convince them one way or another, and I actually don't think it necessarily is. Like, if they want to buy an ad on Facebook, that's their, it is what it is. What I think.
No, that's horrible. No,
I think we need to worry about people being able to focus more on understanding what is true and what is not, and where things are coming from, and making decisions better rather than just believing all the bullshit that flows.
I mean, I agree. Hence, left, right, and center show. But
that comes into the one of my favorite statements. It's a fallacy. It's how kind of looking at things how they should be or how they ought to be versus how they actually are. The reality.
You cut out, Chris.
Hold on. You cut out. Say that again. The reality is what?
There's no way to teach 300 million people how to, fact check correctly. What we can do is mitigate propaganda, these,
propaganda can come from inside the country too.
Sure.
The issue isn't where the propaganda comes from. It's that the propaganda works because people believe it.
This is where my 0.5% of nationalism.
Yeah.
I'm okay if it comes from our country, but not when it comes from other countries.
Better not be Russian propaganda, by God.
See, I'm not. I want people to make decisions on facts and on data and not on bullshit and lies. So I don't give a shit where it comes from.
Tim, this is the equivalent of some guy coming down the street and tweaking your nose to piss you off. Just on that alone, I'm like, Russia can fuck off. Don't be our divisions are bad enough without. I mean, did you see some of the ads that they were running? They're like, it's like all the hashtags, like Hillary for, all the stuff you really hate, like Hillary for prison, I forget some of the other ones, but all that general kind of really red meat kind of
was our actual president, so lock her up's fine.
Yeah, well, yeah. So all the stuff that you hate was they were pumping that kind of stuff up, and I just think. They obviously do not have our best interest in mind. They don't have even the Republicans' best interest in mind. All they are doing is manipulating, and some of that manipulation causes rifts. And it's just, they need to not be doing that.
Yeah, but I have the same belief about Trump. I don't believe Trump had the populace's best interest in mind. I believe Trump had Trump's best interest in mind. Right? And so just because he lives in this country doesn't mean that I should also all of a sudden be like, yeah, it's fine that he's doing it. I actually think that no matter where it comes from.
I don't want to get into the weeds on this, but do you not agree that Russia should stop, or there should be measures taken to stop them?
I do agree with that, yes. But I agree. I think that those measures need to be taken across the board, not to say, we only need to focus on what's coming from outside this country. I think we need to focus on trying to improve the transparency of fact versus fiction in anything that's going across people's faces.
This is, I think,
I don't care about how you read into it, as long as what's behind it is true. That's okay. Interpretation's different, and that's okay. I'm not saying you need to believe it. I believe
no, you don't. I don't think you believe that though, because the entire the DNC hack was correct information. It was stolen by the Russians, and the fact that we saw that information, true as it was a manipulation by Russia. They were using true facts. They were using true emails that were hacked from the DNC. That was all correct facts. And they were still using it in a manipulative way. Because we didn't see any of the RNC's emails. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of scandalous shit in there. Right?
That's true, but hacking is a different thing than the propaganda side of it.
This is where
that's a whole other issue.
Say they're one and the same, but with ultimately, this is where my cynicism comes in. I think we have to be conscious that, again, I've said this before, I'll say it again. The sheer nature of the three of us being in this podcast means even if any of us on any given topic aren't totally versed, we are considerably more politically in tune with the country than 99%, realize 99% of the average American. Twitter, good example, just to kind of conceptualize, because I know you guys are numbers guys, but for audience wise, Twitter, we go on, we see a million people liking a tweet. Well, what's a million? What does a million people matter when you have an election of 150 million votes? Right? It's insignificant. It's
not.
But
not when you have a state that is won by 5,000 votes or 10,000 votes. A million is not insignificant.
But Twitter's also like made of bots and multiple accounts and all these things.
And
there's so much
spread all across the country.
So I'm getting in it.
Right, but I mean, like, maybe it didn't happen in this election or in the Trump-Clinton election, but imagine in the Bush-Gore election. It was a 500-person difference between who became president in this country. That shit can very much matter.
So there's one critical point that I'm getting cut off on making. Is just the 99% of people make their political judgments based on what they see in the fleeting minutes of the day. Logging into Yahoo and seeing WikiLeaks basically criminalizes Hillary, seeing lock her up.
I challenge you on that. 99% of the people decide then. Did you decide then? I didn't. Did you, Nate? I'd say 1% of the population decides then.
But a significant portion of the population, at least 80.
I would maybe. No, to Tim's point, I would probably push back. I was kind of just like passively accepting that 99 figure because I'm an elitist asshole. But I think
no way.
I remember going over this in a class.
Look at the polls historically. As you look at polls in presidential elections and even if you listen to pundits and people talk about it, they're not looking at changing 99% of people's point of views. They're looking at changing 2 or 3 or 4% of people's because they know that most people are already locked in.
I'm not talking about political engagement. I'm not talking about whether or not someone's likely to have a view. It's how little it takes for views to develop and change for a vast majority of the population.
I don't agree.
At least 80. We can disagree, but the facts are facts, dude. At least 80 to 90% of the population develops their thoughts on, they consume news, right? It's not that they're not consuming news. It's that they're not researching deeper. They are believing what they read. You are believing.
No, I agree with that. What I'm arguing is, maybe I misunderstand your point. I'm saying that I thought you were saying that the majority of people, even if it's majority 51%, I still disagree with that. The majority of people are making up their voting minds in the last minute based on some stuff they're reading.
Of course not. What I'm saying is, in the course of an election cycle, people's opinions are very apt to change. People on both sides of the now. Granted, there's locked in people on Republicans, there's locked in people on Democrats. Sure.
And you don't think that's the majority?
He does think that's the majority.
We're simplifying the terms here, but what I'm saying is
no, not at all. Because if we only have 4 or 5 swing states across the country, and even in those swing states, it's a 50-50 break. You're looking at a very small percentage of the population that actually change their minds based on shit that comes out.
We totally agree, and so you should be terrified by the fact that people are very susceptible to propaganda. The vast majority of people are very susceptible, and that's not going to change. You can't teach the whole country to fact check, which is why as a country we need to mitigate foreign interference. At least we have to mitigate that because people's opinions.
We agree, but my only stance is it's not just about foreign, it's about internal as well.
Sure. And so we should mitigate that too, right? But what I'm saying is that people's minds are very, very malleable. People are not politically in tune. They're not sitting here taking notes on the Mueller report. They're reading the titles, and that's what they get.
We haven't talked about the Mueller report.
I know. I just want to say, I kind of like Chris, for some reason, I sort of just I agree with you with what you're saying. It just kind of makes sense inside my head. But then Tim he's bringing up a really valid point, which is that, what is the swing vote? The swing vote's 4 or 5% of the population. Everybody already knows where they're voting. I'm not saying people aren't susceptible to propaganda, but even to that point, the people that, you're not saying this out loud, and maybe you don't even mean this, so I don't want to put this in your mouth. But Republicans, as far as reading propaganda, yeah, Republicans watch Fox News, but statistically speaking, conservatives read across the aisle far more than the left does. So I don't think
where's that data?
Okay, so I will grant you I don't have it in front of me, but it's a pretty well respected survey that is generally fact.
I'm not saying it's false. I'd like to see it because my intuition.
I'll see if I can pull it up. Maybe you guys can Could you talk about
it goes deeper though than just the swing vote. What I'm saying is everybody's incredibly susceptible because even those who have had their minds made up are not truly diving deep engaged in the politics. I realize this is a very view.
So I think we have two things going on here though. Like, and I agree. So I agree with you on one side. I agree with you on one side that people are malleable and people are susceptible to propaganda. I 100% agree with you, and I would say the majority of people.
But
I will agree with you on that. Where I disagree is that propaganda would change their mind on something that they have a core belief in. So, as an example, if I'm a religious person and I see propaganda that come across that says my religion is bullshit, I'm not going to believe it. If I'm a Republican and I'm a hardcore Republican or even a decently strong Republican, and I see propaganda that comes across that is anti-Republican, I'm just not going to believe it. So I don't think, as far as it goes into the election side, it changes a lot of people's minds. But I think that
show up in your timeline, you would get propaganda that was anti-Muslim or anti other to further your divide. What I'm saying is that I'm saying several things, but the biggest thing is that everyone's susceptible, including swing voters, and so all propaganda is hoping is that it also is about voter disenfranchisement. Our voter guys, like only 60 to 70%, not even 70, 60 to 67% of people that are eligible to vote actually vote. Think about that.
This was the highest percentage ever, I think, right?
And it was only
in the 60s. Like almost half the country didn't vote. Right? How did half the country not vote?
Because of voter disenfranchisement. Propaganda isn't just about. It's not just about changing votes. It's getting people to not vote. Plenty of people are Republican that did not vote in this election. I'm not saying that's a product of propaganda.
On that topic, I saw an interesting article that said that the reason that Trump is losing Georgia is because he convinced people not to vote absentee. And the reason they're saying this is the amount of people that came out and voted for the primary and claimed that they were Republican, and then actually came out and voted for the presidency was a smaller percentage than that same, I guess, comparison for the Democrats. And it's because the Democrats used, I guess, absentee ballots, and then the Republicans just decided not to vote at all. I don't know. But
I'm pretty surprised. I guess what I'm just saying is very simplified, very, very simplified, because I just want to say it in layman's terms, because if I don't, I'm making these prolonged statements, they're going to get cut off.
I'll cut you off.
I'm very cynical about the average voter and the average American's involvement in politics. I think that's one of the biggest problems in our country. As a product of that, we're especially susceptible to propaganda, either deepening. Russia's goal was not to get one person elected or the other. It was to deepen our political beliefs on either side, and to.
No, I think it was to get Trump elected.
Sure, but
that's a fact.
I think it's both. My feelings is both.
There's multiple wins Russia got. Russia got people furthering on the left. They got them furthering on the right. They got a Trump presidency that divided the country, and just as divided. That's what Russia wanted. And now here people are like not talking to their grandma anymore because they're afraid.
Hey,
fuck
that's
you,
a
grandma.
problem. I still talk to my grandma.
Yeah, so I mean,
we tangented a lot. We should get back to the movie.
I know. Hey, I'm gonna pull back my statement. I'm gonna look more into that statement about conservatives reading more left-leaning stuff. I just swear on my podcast heart that I've seen that before. I looked something up right now and I saw contradicting evidence. So instead of bringing that up, I will research this more when I don't have to
fake news. Fox News.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So okay. All right. So the Mueller thing. Oh, we're talking about Mueller. God, we're so good at tangents. We've had really nice tangents tonight, have we not? Really good.
Yeah, really good tangents.
It feels like an after-hours talk with me and you.
It does. Yeah. But to try to ground ourselves here. Okay, so okay. Did I? Yeah, I summarized. Okay, so Tim. So okay. All right. So Chris, you seem to think that the Russians got him elected, but okay, so let me just ask the both of you. Did Donald Trump collude with the Russians?
Okay. So by collude, what do you mean?
Did Donald Trump knowingly try to communicate with Russia to get any sort of information or help or boost?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
I think people on the left would typically say yes, but I'm going to say inconclusive. Not enough information.
It's not actually inconclusive. It's just the fact that they can't charge him with it.
Why can't they charge him with it?
Kind of to what I said before, there wasn't enough of the evidence all the way along the chain to make that charge. It's like,
okay, so Schrodinger's cat here, Tim. Schrodinger's cat, is the cat dead? If you cannot prove that something exists, what does that mean?
No. You're taking it a bit out of context there.
No, I'm not.
The ability to prove to prove that it happened and the ability to prove that what happened was illegal are two different things, right?
Okay.
So with collusion,
let me play a clip.
Hold on. This goes back to the point of what I'm saying before. With collusion, it requires knowledge that you're breaking the law. How do you prove that?
Okay, that is actually a made-up standard.
Okay,
James
apparently
Comey
it's
made
not because, well, that may be true if Comey decided to not do it because of that, but that's what's in the fucking Mueller report.
Okay, let me play something.
Mueller has said. Go ahead. Finally, get your technology.
This is Mueller's deposition before Congress. So I might have to fill around the volume. But let me know if you guys can hear this.
Today. No. Your report states that your investigative team included 19 lawyers and approximately 40 FBI agents and analysts and accountants. Are those numbers accurate?
Could you repeat that, please?
40 FBI agents, 19 lawyers, intelligence analysts, and forensic accountants. Are those numbers accurate? This was included in your report.
Generally, yes.
Is it also true that you issued over 2,800 subpoenas, executed nearly 500 search warrants, obtained more than 230 orders for communication records, and 50 pen registers?
That went a little fast for me.
Okay. In your report, I'll make this very simple. You did a lot of work, correct?
Yes, that I agree.
A lot of subpoenas, a lot of pen registers.
A lot of subpoenas. Yes.
Okay, we'll walk this really slow if we need to.
Search warrants.
Come on, dude. This guy's being an ass.
A lot of things. So you're very thorough. In your opinion,
he has a point he's trying to make.
Out in your report, correct?
I get he's trying to make a point. He's being an ass.
Is it true the evidence gathered during your investigation, given the questions that you have just answered, is it true the evidence gathered during your investigation did not establish that the president was involved in the underlying crime related to Russian election interference as stated in Volume 1, page 7?
We found insufficient evidence of the president's culpability.
So that would be a yes.
Pardon?
That would be a yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Isn't it true the evidence did not establish?
I mean, exactly. That's what I just said.
Hold on. Let's just finish this up real quick.
In the charged Russian computer hacking or active measure conspiracies, or that the president otherwise had unlawful relationships with any Russian official. Volume 2, page 76. Correct?
I leave the answer to our report.
So as a yes. Is that any true? Your investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with Russian government in the election interference activity. Volume 1, page 2, Volume 1, page 173.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Although you're
okay.
Yeah. So hold on. This is the conspiracy part. That's what I'm trying
part
to say.
I'm concerned about.
So in his report, in the Mueller report, right, he specifically has evidence, email evidence that shows Trump Jr., Paul Manafort, Jared Kushner meeting with Republican nationals in the Trump Tower in 2016
Russian nationals
during the election. Yes, and for the purpose of reviewing the disparaging info on Clinton that they had hacked from the DNC. Right? This is all in an email. It shows this is why they're meeting. This is what they're talking about, and they have it. The problem is they can't show that any of those people know that it's particularly illegal to meet with them. That's the anti-conspiracy part. So, and that's why he worded his answer initially the way he did in saying, yes, there's insufficient evidence to show that there was a crime. They can't convict him of a crime. That doesn't mean that he didn't do something wrong.
So let me phrase this another way. So as he was setting it up, millions and millions and millions of dollars spent, 2 years, 3 years, incredibly thorough investigation.
Okay, hold on. Before you continue on, I want to ask
because you know what I'm going to say.
No, I don't, but I want to ask you a question. Do you think that an investigation, regardless of what it's into, that doesn't result in a conviction is a waste of money and time?
No.
Okay, then why does it matter how much they spent or what effort they went into?
My point is how thorough
investigation?
My point is how thorough they were.
I imagine they were pretty thorough.
They were. It was one of
one thing that is I hear from a lot of people on the right is this notion about we spent $40 million. Like Trump has tweeted this, and kind of the interpretation that I imagine he would like to be received is that this is a waste of tax dollars. I think he's even said it. Tax dollars have gone to this. To be fair, $40 million is really insignificant. It's really insignificant in terms of government funding. It's not.
Well, hey, look. I mean, to their point, in hindsight, it's a waste. I'm not going to say. I'm not going to say. So since it came up that he did not do this, or that we cannot prove that he did this, it was a waste. But that's playing hindsight, and that's not fair. So it's not necessarily fair to say that the Mueller investigation was a waste of time. It just turns out that in the end, Robert Mueller was not able to prove that Donald Trump colluded with Russia. And in lawyer speak, that means he's not guilty.
No, if you read through, if he was anybody but the president, he would have been charged.
Nope. No.
Yes.
He was specifically asked that by Democratic senators. That question that you just that statement
Where's
you
that
just made
video?
was
Where's
asked
his
to
response
Robert
to
Mueller.
that? Where's that response?
Look it up. It's in here somewhere.
Because I would like to see that
in
one.
this
Because if you read
deposition.
through his report and then you listen to his comments afterwards on multiple occasions, he specifically says that because he is a sitting president, we do not have the authority to indict him. That is up to the Senate. We are giving this information to them.
Yes,
to let them make the decision.
Yes, he was asked, "Are you?" So that was a statement, and that is a correct statement. He was asked, "Are you?" If that wasn't, he was asked if that was not a thing, like if that law did not exist, would you indict him? And he said no.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. I haven't seen that statement.
Yeah, I mean, listen. For anybody who's listening, I know this is old stuff again and again. Like we're just doing this because we need to hash this out on the podcast. But I thought that was a fascinating interview. I mean, Mueller was not quite what I expected. He actually, he sounds like he was. I think didn't they pull him out of retirement? Like he's kind of an old dude. A lot of times he. So I got a ton of respect for the dude. I have absolutely no problems with Robert Mueller. But like a lot of times they would ask him a question and he was kind of like, I mean, you saw some of it there. He was like, what? And then he's like, whatever the report said, that's what I'm going with. Like he really didn't want to be there. You could tell, I mean, before that and after that, he was like, I gave you my report. I don't know why you need me to, attest. But anyways, I digress. So it's a good interview. I would watch it.
Totally. Mueller, I mean, just like you said, he's a well-respected guy. I think the reason why it's a coin toss in this example, but because he's so well respected by both sides of the political aisle, regardless, people knew, he's being pulled out of retirement. He's an old dude. And he's like, I don't know the report. But that's the fact is, regardless, the point of a Mueller appointment is that he's so unpartisan to such an extreme that, he's Republican, but he's so noble to the cause that regardless of the outcome, regardless of what he published, I believe it would have been accepted. The reality is, people on the left, we kind of got quiet about it afterwards. Well, damn, can't really challenge Mueller on that. Didn't find. He does explicitly say he doesn't exonerate Trump, but he can't make him guilty, which I guess, the interpretation.
But he said that about the second charge. But that's kind of like again, for lawyers speak, saying that an investigation doesn't exonerate something. An investigation's purpose is never, no matter who you are or what investigation it is, an investigation's purpose is not to exonerate somebody. An investigation's purpose is to gather evidence to indict somebody. Just because you don't, just because I can't find evidence that Tim is, running around in underpants in the middle of the night punching people in the face doesn't mean it's not happening. Just means my investigation didn't turn it up. It's not possible to exonerate somebody through investigation.
That's a good point.
Right. So and that goes to Tim's point.
I'm looking for your statement, and I can't find it, but I did find an article that seems to be worded towards what you were saying, but it actually doesn't say it in there. And so he was asked, I guess this is a senator, says, the reason, again, that you did not indict Donald Trump is because of the OLC being Office of Legal Counsel.
Yep. That's the law that prevents sitting presidents from being indicted.
Yeah, stating that you cannot indict a sitting president. He says that is correct. And then later in this article, there goes on a couple other things where they say, like, was there sufficient evidence to convict him? And he says, we did not make that calculation, but that has to do with him being a president. And then it says, okay, but could you charge the president with a crime after he left office? Yes, Mueller said. You believe that he committed, you could charge the president of the United States with obstruction of justice after he left office. Yes, was Mueller's answer.
Yeah, but that's a hypothetical. He's not saying he's not saying will. He's saying
that the only reason they didn't charge him with a hypothetical crime is because he's the president.
No. That's a hypothetical question right there. He's not talking about this specific instance. He's saying, can you charge a president after he's out of office? Those are all loose hypotheticals. He's not saying he's not basically asking, do you recommend that we charge Trump after he leaves office?
So I get the difference in interpretation. You're saying that the question is asking, could you charge a sitting president after he leaves office with a obstruction charge? And he's saying yes. And I interpret the question to be, would you be able to charge Trump if after he leaves office with a crime based on this evidence? And him saying yes. That's two different interpretations. I see both.
Listen to the indictment. So I mean, of the three of us, I don't want to pull this card, and I really shouldn't, but I'm mostly 2 beers deep. I'm the one that watched it. So I have kind of a benefit here. I remember this question being asked.
But you're the Trump twister.
Yes, I'm biased. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, I mean, I'm fascinated by this stuff. So obviously, like a 4-hour, 5-hour depositions, whatever. It's fun to me. I just listen to it in the car. But I mean, this one was pretty pivotal. You probably should go watch it.
Let me read this quote. I believe a reasonable person looking at these facts could conclude that all 3 elements of a crime of obstruction of justice have been met. And I'd like to ask you the reason again you did not indict Donald Trump is because of the DOJ's Office of Legal Counsel opinion stating that you cannot indict a sitting president. Correct? ? Mueller answers, that is correct.
Yeah, well, that seems to contradict me, doesn't it? I don't know. I don't remember that from the hearing, man.
Well, I'm glad you watched it, though, and you're the expert, so pull that card out.
Yeah,
that's the point, though. Is like when you're watching something with a bias, it matters, right? Like, but my point is that my point isn't necessarily that Trump did or didn't commit a crime, or they should have been indicted or not. My point is that the Mueller report showed a lot of information, and that Trump, was involved in a lot of this stuff. And although it wasn't necessarily a crime, a lot came from it.
He wasn't, though. Okay, so you're telling
me that Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, Manafort, were in this meeting, and Trump never heard about it.
They had no evidence to suggest that he did know about that.
Okay. No,
you can say okay, but they spent $40 million researching this. They should have found a link if it was there.
They have evidence. They have his lawyer stating that he knew about it, that he told him about it, right? But everyone just says, oh, he's a liar, you can't trust him, right? There's evidence. It's just being denied. It's just that it's not enough to actually put out a criminal charge on a sitting president. That's the part that keeps getting left out.
Apparently I'm underprepared for this, but that's so look, okay. So I just have to say, bottom line, his answer was no. We did not have sufficient evidence to charge for collusion. It wasn't no, we didn't have sufficient evidence because of the ruling of the whatever office it was.
No, that is exactly what he said. No, that is exactly what he said. The only reason they didn't. So there's 2 different charges. I believe on the collusion part, you are correct. I believe there's not sufficient evidence to charge with collusion because I think the FBI has the authority to charge with collusion. I think that is one of the
Right,
charges.
or conspiracy, as it's called.
Or conspiracy. I think you're right on that part. I think on the
That's
other
the part
hand,
I care about. I care less about the
both. You don't care
obstruction.
about the obstruction of justice?
I care less about it.
So hold on. You don't care that the president fired the head of the FBI because they were investigating him? You don't think that's bullshit?
He fired him for a whole bunch of reasons.
Okay. Yeah, not because he was investigating him.
First of all,
And hold on. And on top of that, there's
Dude, no, stop it.
Mueller. Hold on. I believe it's Mueller. There's testimony from one of the heads of the FBI. It's in my notes again, but I got to look. Where Trump literally came in and said, "You are going to stop investigating Flynn. I want you to stop investigating Flynn." Right? Like, and then when he didn't do it, he got fired. So it wasn't Mueller. It was I have to look. But anyway.
Okay,
yeah,
so,
that's bullshit.
So number one, in this video, I'm not going to poke around for it, but in the video that I have pulled up that I was just showing you, he was asked directly, has your investigation in any way been curtailed by the president? And the answer was no. The answer wasn't no with a couple qualifiers. The answer wasn't, well, maybe, like when he fired Comey, we kind of rethought our whole thing. The answer was no. We have not been interfered with at all. That was from Mueller. Okay.
So he was able to do his investigation despite Trump's effort. So just so you know, obstruction of justice does not, hold on, no, legally, look this up. Obstruction of justice does not require that you actually obstructed justice. It just means that you made an attempt to obstruct the justice.
Then why wasn't he charged?
I just told you. They found multiple cases where he would have been charged. Yes.
Okay, so Comey was fired for being an ass, right? So Comey came out and gave press conference. So James Comey is responsible for single-handedly making the FBI a politicized organization. That is James Comey's fault. That should be a fireable offense in its own. Second of all, Trump fired him probably more, but also because of the other reason, probably more because Comey told Trump, and I have an article right up here in front of me. Comey told Trump 3 times that he wasn't under investigation, but his refusal to publicly say so infuriated Trump. Now, there was good reasons for Comey not to do things publicly, say that publicly. As it turns out.
Comey told Trump that Trump wasn't.
Comey told Trump 3 times that he wasn't under the counterintelligence investigation. He was not one of the 4 people, Flynn, Papadopoulos, whatever the other 2 were. He was not one of those 4. He was not getting a counterintelligence investigation, and Trump wanted him to go public with it, and he wouldn't. So that was part of the reason why he got fired.
The whole thing that started the Mueller report, like that's the initial part, right? It all
the counterintelligence investigation.
Yeah.
So that's distinct. So
Trump's campaign was under investigation, which could include Trump if it led that way. So I don't think that's a fair statement.
So on top of that, right? So Comey got fired for that reason. So on top of that, right? So all of those things to consider, like that's why he fired Comey, and he obviously didn't actually obstruct the investigation because it went through without a hitch. Trump knew the whole time that this whole thing was not going to uncover anything, right? And he was frustrated because they would not say that. As a matter of fact, James Clapper was on. James Clapper's the assistant director of
other
the
than
FBI.
Just firing Comey, there were multiple occasions where they found evidence that would, if he was anyone but the sitting president, have counted for obstruction of justice. Not just firing of Comey. There was like 4 or 5 different incidences that they found that counted towards that would have been enough on their own individually to count as obstruction of justice. So it's not just about firing Comey, and outside of that, the investigation itself into Russia collusion, again, we've talked about, they did find evidence that there was not legally collusion, because that requires the knowledge that you're committing something illegal, and you have to be able to prove that somebody knows that they're doing that, but that there was people from his campaign and people that are very close to the president meeting with Russia to get hacked information and negative information from Russian nationalists, which to me is, I don't know, a foreign government.
Yeah, so that's not accurate. So you have to be very specific with this stuff.
Okay, I'm using.
So, for example, Michael Flynn was under investigation for his contact with the Russian government. He never got charged with that because the Hatch Act, which they were trying to charge him with, is unconstitutional and nobody actually uses it. He got charged with lying to the FBI, and that's it. That's all of it. They charged him with that to try to get him to flip on Trump.
You keep talking about charging, and I keep talking about actions. Like, I agree with you.
Yeah, no. He's the incoming national security advisor. It's not wrong for him to be speaking with the Russians. It's not illegal and it's not wrong.
Let's go back to the one example that I've mentioned. Trump Jr., Paul Manafort,
let me just put something out here.
Jared Kushner.
Joe Biden is right now speaking with other governments.
I'm talking about in 2016 when none of these people were in the fucking government.
Yes, Joe Biden is not part of the government right now. He is actively talking to other governments. There's no problem with that.
Right. So the email shows that they were talking to them about getting information on Hillary. It's not oh, hey, let's talk in general.
Correct.
We're going to talk about
now you're talking about
Hillary.
What's that guy's name? Roger Stone. So
no,
Roger
I'm talking
Stone
about
was
Trump Jr., Paul Manafort, and Jared Kushner.
Okay, no, you're conflating a whole bunch of things, man.
I'm not.
A whole bunch of things. Yes, you
are.
In
the Mueller report, Trump Jr., Paul Manafort, Jared Kushner met with Russian nationals in Trump Tower in 2016 for the purpose of reviewing disparaging info on Clinton. End quote. Yep. That is in the Mueller report.
Okay, what's the rest of the end quote? There's more in there. So what came out of that meeting?
I'm only stating that people from his campaign, those people met
Context
with
matters.
Russians to get negative information about his counterparty, the person running against him.
So context matters. So first of all, Hillary Clinton received material from foreign sources on Donald Trump. Nobody has a problem with that. The whole Steele dossier was...
Say that again. This wasn't about the Steele dossier.
I'm drawing a comparison. Hillary Clinton received foreign dirt on Donald Trump, and it's not a problem. The whole dossier came from a British guy, and it was subsourced from a Russian asset. So, don't pretend you have a problem with people receiving dirt from...
It's as much a problem as either side. My whole point is we're talking about the Mueller report.
Did you know about it before now?
No. That doesn't mean that it's not a problem. It just means that somebody else thought it wasn't a problem and didn't report on it.
Right. Why is she not in jail right now then?
Why is Trump not in jail?
She wasn't president.
Why is Trump Jr., Paul Manafort, and Jared Kushner not in jail? None of them are in jail.
Right, because nothing came out of that meeting you're talking about. They basically told her to have a nice day.
Oh yeah, okay. Yep.
What came out of it?
I believe that.
Hold on. Did you run this investigation? Did you read the what came out of that meeting?
All right. Well, Chris hasn't talked in a while, so let's let him talk while I go through the notes and find the top part where it talks about that. But
hey, Chris.
He's passing out.
No, you guys got pretty fired up, and
I know. It's fine. I have fun with this.
I think to me, there's a few. Nothing I'm going to say is going to be new to this debate, but I will say this whole presidency, including the Mueller report, has brought forward so many concerns I have on executive power. Like, why can't we indict a sitting president? Not saying that even...
Yeah, what's the purpose? I'm sure there's a purpose. I haven't thought about it too much. I'm not particularly comfortable with it.
It's basically, the mentality that, you want a president to get, weighed down in lawsuits, and then how are they going to govern the country?
Fair enough, because you could do that. Right, think about that. Like the Fifth Circuit Court of... I'm sorry, I'm probably messing that up, but the New York courts or whatever they've been after Trump this whole freaking time, which is kind of weird. Actually, so never mind. Well, that's not shielding him.
Well, he has some pretty legitimate shady stuff that
I guess
is worth.
You don't think it's a little targeted?
I'm pretty sure that becoming president, I'm sure people are going to be looking now. No one's looking at some billionaire on Wall Street now that I'm sure is scamming a bunch of people, but that person is in the shadows. They're not the president. So Trump jumping into the public image, that's going to bring that forward as well. But deeper than that, I think on one end, it really bothers me that we can't indict a sitting president. I'm not saying that we should be able to openly indict one as if they were anybody, but come on, there has to be.
But you can impeach them.
Yeah, but that doesn't.
But when you think about it, though, now that I'm thinking about it, that is the remedy, right? You can
It is.
impeach them, and then once they're impeached, they're liable to lawsuits.
Here's the issue with impeachment versus indicting, in my opinion. When you indict somebody, and although the legal system has increasingly become politicized, when you indict somebody, the idea is that you go to the legal side of our government, which is supposed to be independent from politics, and they can make an independent review of the evidence. Whereas when you're impeaching somebody, it's going to the House and or to the Senate, both, which are obviously politicized groups of people and will make decisions based on that.
Yeah. It goes deeper too. I just want to say, in terms of executive authority, it freaks me out, especially right now. It bothered me. I don't like Comey. It bothers me that the president can just unilaterally fire that person. It also bothers me that right now Trump has been gutting. Right now, here's a reality. Whether you like this or not, I have friends on the Hill that have been confirming like what it's like and what we see in the news. Where if you are in the Trump administration right now, and you even begin, so this is a normal routine. When administrations switch over, people will circulate their resume so they can get a new job. So there are staffers in the Trump White House right now, low-level staffers, high-level staffers, department chairs that would like to go maybe be a chief of staff or a staffer or a assistant, director of policy under, Senator Roy Blunt. If they are found circulating the resume, they're fired immediately. And that puts them into unemployment for a couple months. And it's going to be harder for them to get hired.
What the fuck?
Republicans. That is what
I thought you were going to go somewhere else with that. I'd been hearing that current Trump administrators were finding it difficult to get job offers for future stuff.
But
that was a Twitter threat. The conservatives were not happy with that. Did you see that?
I just passively heard something like that, so I thought that's where you were going. But
he also appointed a new person that's just been gutting like any dissenters, anyone who any single time someone says anything that like is like in favor of Joe Biden's going to be the president. It's they're fired. There's been people being. It's pretty bad. It's like bad. It's like, come on, dude, have some loyalty to these are the people that actually move the gears of government, like these staffers, these advisors, these department chairs, these actually heads of department. These are the actual gears of government, and we're just firing them like because they're not being. That's fascism, dude. That's some
fascism. Don't say fascism. It's
disgusting loyalty. It's disgusting demands of loyalty.
Sure, I guess. All right. Did you find anything, Tim?
I don't even remember what I was looking for now.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay,
I started listening to you guys. What was I looking for? Do you remember?
To wrap this up in a bow, I don't know because it's getting a little late here. The Mueller investigation. I mean, he quite clearly said that there's no evidence, and in lawyerly speak. So
he did not say there's no evidence.
I just played you a clip where he said there's
insufficient evidence. There's way difference from no evidence to insufficient evidence.
Okay, fair enough.
That's exactly the point I'm making. Insufficient means, hey, we can't prove that they knew that they were committing a crime, although all the evidence shows they were committing a crime. That is completely different than saying there's no evidence to say they were committing a crime at all.
There was no evidence that Trump knew what was going on whatsoever. You can believe what you want.
No, I agree with you. I don't want to say that there was but I agree.
No, there was none.
Hypothetically, I'm going to agree with that, right? That doesn't mean that there's no evidence that he actually did the stuff that's a crime. You just need that extra piece on there to make it the crime, right? Like, it's like, hey, I didn't know murdering somebody was wrong, so I'm innocent. And I get that that's not part of murder, but it doesn't, like, the point being is there may be evidence that you murdered somebody, but you didn't know it was wrong, so it's okay. Like, that's kind of what happened here.
No evidence of the crime. I have heard nothing that actually ties Donald Trump to any of this.
There is evidence that the people that were talking with Russia and getting this information with Russia are saying that they were repeatedly and constantly updating Trump, and Trump was aware and involved. That exists. That evidence out there.
That's Roger Stone. Have you met the guy?
It's not just Roger Stone. It's multiple people, including his lawyer Cohen and other people. The point being That's not why he didn't get charged. It's not because that it didn't show that he knew that this was happening and he was involved with it. It's that there was no clear evidence to be able to put all the pieces together. Right.
So also it's a big distinction, and this is very complicated. So if you're still hanging in there, God bless you. But you have to remember, just because any of those people said something to Trump, right? And I think there was actually people told Trump, hey, the Russians are going to drop this, or Julian Assange is going to drop this, or drop something in the next few days. Just because you are told that does not mean there is collusion. Collusion is very, you have to understand, none of that stuff flows back down through. You have to establish that Trump then said, okay, now here's what I need the Russians to do. He actually has to engage with them, and there's absolutely no evidence for that.
Right.
Trump is I agree with you. Say, okay.
I agree with you. I think, and I don't think Trump is an idiot. I think he's smart enough to know how to keep his fingers out of stuff, especially from the business world that he's been in for so long. The way I look at it is this way. You have to have a completed 1,000-piece puzzle to be able to indict a sitting president, regardless, not because you need it to just indict a sitting president. I mean, but you're not going to indict a president without all the pieces there, right? You're not going to half-ass it. So imagine you need a 1,000-piece puzzle complete to indict a sitting president, and you only have 800 of the pieces. It's pretty clear. You can see what the picture is, what happened, what's going on here. It's just not enough to get all the way to the finish line. And that is what the Mueller report did. The Mueller report came out and said, all of these things happened. Everything that you think is bullshit and wrong about dealing with the Russian government and getting this information from them, it happened. It just, we don't have enough of the pieces to put together and say, yeah, we can charge him. And then on the obstruction of justice side, the same thing happened, except they said, we do have all the pieces, except unfortunately, we really can't indict him because of him being a sitting president.
Okay.
That's what came out of the Mueller report.
For my closing statements, and then I'll let, maybe the two of you can say, whatever, and then we'll finish up there. What you just said right there. So what you have to understand from legal speak is that saying that we don't have the evidence means that it didn't happen. Legally speaking, it did not happen. Right. So that might indicate that in actuality it didn't happen. But like what you just said right there, that's like saying, hey, Tim, we found you walking near the crime scene with a knife, and there was blood on that knife, but it's not the victim's blood, and you didn't actually do it, so we can't charge you.
No, it's like saying the glove didn't fit, so acquit. OJ didn't do it. He's innocent.
Sure, buddy.
Right? That's the point.
Hey, no evidence for the crime. Didn't happen.
So let me say it this way, though. I want to. Sorry to cut you off, Chris. I know it's your turn.
You're fine.
I'm glad that the legal system requires very strong evidence. One of the worst feelings in the world, if you close your eyes and imagine being wrongfully imprisoned or executed or whatever for the rest of your life, right? Because of something you didn't do. That's abhorrent. It's so painful to think about. So I'm glad that a lot of these laws are in place that require an extensive amount of evidence and things to prove that something happened. But don't fool yourself in thinking that because all of the evidence isn't there, that something actually didn't happen, right? Like sometimes these things happen and we just can't prove it all the way. I'm not. I'm reading to you things from reports, and I've read things to you before already that have disproven the statements that you've said.
Yep, couple of
these things obviously have happened. In my opinion, they've happened, but they weren't enough to be charged with, and that's okay. The Mueller report to me was very eye-opening as to what was going on within his organization. And I'm going to stop and let Chris talk. Sorry.
No, I basically I think I'm actually pretty much in the middle ground of you guys on this one. Is
that's weird.
Yeah, it kind of is.
Left, right, and center, boys.
I just don't want to be a hypocrite. I want to operate not just with emotion, but logic, and I tend to side with Nathan on this in the sense that, and I guess middle ground. Yeah, you know what? I wouldn't be surprised in 10, 15 years from now when more things are out and Trump's dead and some random
Right, he writes his memoir and it's in there.
Yeah, Melania Sims.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised by it, but the reality is he's been acquitted, and so I'm just gonna have to accept that, especially because the reality is Mueller is a respectable human being. I have read the report. I have gone through it and read it, and I would love to see it without the redactions. But the reality is that I'm going to.
Has he been acquitted?
What?
Yes.
Trump?
He certainly hasn't been charged.
I'm just saying. I guess.
Well, yeah. So you have to be acquitted.
Hold on, you have to be charged to be acquitted. So he hasn't even.
Yes.
He hasn't been charged.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is I'm going to put my faith in Mueller, faith in the system on this one, and the reality is that if there's evidence out there, it hasn't been found, and kudos to people for being able to be really good barriers or diggers or hiders or whatnot. But otherwise, yeah, I'm siding in the middle.
I agree with you. I think that the system worked the way it was supposed to. And again, I agree that we need to have high bounds for being able to charge somebody, especially a sitting president. They have tough decisions to make. And if you're able to go in and question everything that they have to do, the same that you would question anybody else, that would make the job even more difficult. And that doesn't mean that there wasn't illuminating information and things that came out. And I think the biggest argument I want to make against for the Mueller report is, I guess, against the right, is the right uses it as a way to say, see, nothing happened. And in my opinion, that's not what the Mueller report says. The Mueller report says, yeah, a lot of shit happened, but not enough, right? Or there's not enough evidence, or, for the position he's in, right? A combination of those two. And so I don't think the Mueller report's so damning to say he should have been necessarily taken out of office because of it. I just think the Mueller report has a lot of information in it that needs to be understood to be factual, that there was Trump campaign people working with Russia, getting this information on Hillary, which is illegal, but that part needs other things along with it, and those didn't happen or weren't evidence. And then also that there was clear obstruction of justice that happened for anybody other than the sitting president. I don't think that he should have been fired because of it or taken out of office. I'm just saying, that information is real and true, and
But
it's in
if
there.
what you're saying is true, I would think he should be fired.
It is true, though. Go through and go back. Okay, so hold on. Do me a favor. Now that he's probably going to be out of office, and it doesn't even matter, he can't be impeached because of it. Go back and watch some of the stuff that you said you did before. I spent a lot of time this week going through this. I didn't have a lot of in-depth information about this before we decided to talk about this week. I spent many hours this week going through information, and this is what I came up with. This isn't bipartisan. This wasn't only from CNN, this was me looking at all kinds of different sources, watching interviews, watching stuff, taking notes. This is, in my opinion, legit.
Yeah, I think it's the bias. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. I think that was a pretty good podcast. I really enjoyed it. That was the podcast of tangents. Is probably gonna have a lot of good stuff to clip from that. So for everybody,
passion.
Yeah. So for any new people we have watching, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe. We're about to explode. We're about to hit 90 million subscribers on whatever channel you're not watching. Basically,
advertising in China, are we?
That's right. Yeah. Oh, that China money. We're also about to get Koch brothers money and George Soros money, so stick around. It's about to get way more high production. We're gonna get Tim hair implants, but not
I don't want
red.
them. No, I don't want them.
It's gonna be all the way down on his forehead and weird places like his arms and stuff. All right, so
half of this is by choice. The other half is genetic. This part all here, this is all genetic. I can't do that.
That sounds like fake news. And with that, I guess we'll sign off. Thanks everybody. It was a great conversation. Have a good night.
Good night, guys. Thanks for watching.